Hey everybody, Steve here in Kinderhook, New York. And as you can see, I'm here at the gravesite of President Martin Van Buren. I was actually over there by his gravesite, but there's someone else over there filming and taking pictures, so I was trying to give him his space. He was here first, so I thought I would just let you know where I am over here by the road. It's also interesting if you're coming here yourself, if you're planning to visit here yourself, just be aware the GPS, at least my Google GPS, got me here sort of, but they told me to make a left over there, which is just a cul-de-sac. And so I drove around a couple of times here before I realized that this is not a gated cemetery here where President Martin Van Buren is laid to rest. And there are no streets, no sidewalks, there's nothing here other than just the grass. So what I did, you can see my car over here, across the street, I just parked across the street. There is a cemetery there. I don't know if it's the same cemetery, just split by this highway, or if it's a different cemetery. I think it's the same. And so you just park over there and you just walk across the street to Van Buren's headstone or monument, gravesite. Right back here, you can see it's the tallest of the obelisks there. This is out kind of in the country like so many of the other president gravesites that I've visited. It took me a while to get here. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, kind of in the boonies. So the only way you're going to know that this is the cemetery, in fact, when I was on the highway, it definitely had signs saying Martin Van Buren's cemetery or memorial. I think probably a memorial. There were quite a few signs, so I thought as I drove down here into this little country, on this little country road, there'd be a really nice big sign somewhere saying that he was laid to rest here, but all I see is this marker right here, which is nice once you get close, but I drove by twice, didn't see this at all, didn't see this either. So this is also very small and almost covered by the tree. I drove by, I was actually looking for an entrance, I was looking for a street because my GPS said make a left, it's right here. But it is here, but there's no way to make a left, there's no parking and there's no street into the cemetery. I don't know, it seems about maybe half of the presidents that I visited so far just have regular graves in cemeteries, very unassuming, very modest. There's not really much to this cemetery. I mean, this is a very small cemetery, similar to Franklin Pierce's cemetery, who I visited yesterday. Again, also ungated and about this size, just fairly small. So back then, I guess, some of the presidents were just buried in regular graves like everybody else, and it's very different today where some of the presidential final resting places are now like amusement parks. Well, even George Washington's, I mean, doesn't get much more like an amusement park than George Washington's gravesite and home, Mount Vernon. And the event that I went to was probably one of the most spectacular events that I've ever seen. Definitely the most interesting and spectacular events that I've seen in a presidential gravesite. But even some of the other more modern presidential libraries are tourist attractions and almost like amusement parks. So very different from how presidents like Martin Van Buren and Calvin Coolidge and Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan and a handful of others that I visited, their grave sites. They're just regular cemeteries, which is very modest, at least modest for a president. So now that I finally found the cemetery, let's go walk around and see if we can find his grave site. And I think I see it over here. I think it's that big obelisk right there. And I see flags on some of the graves besides the obelisk, which is, I believe, the president up there. This one, I have no idea, can't read it at all. Free love, that's interesting. That's nice. Oh, I see a couple of people over there walking around looking at grave sites, so I guess I'm not alone today. Now, many of these have fallen down, or they're just so deteriorated over the years that they're not readable. They're not legible, unfortunately. Yeah, I can't read that at all. Sad. I think it would be nice to keep these stones, but it would really be nice if maybe the historical society, I'm sure they must have one here, if they would put little plaques next to some of the historic graves saying who these people are. I've seen that done in a number of different cemeteries, and it's really nice to be able to keep the original stone, but also to know who the person is. Now, this is really neat, isn't it? That's really pretty. Even though the person's name is completely gone with time. It's been completely erased. Look at these neat flowers. Now, this is the largest and most impressive private mausoleum here in the cemetery, or monument, and you can see that's the president's gravesite, Martin Van Buren, right behind Peter Bain. So it makes you wonder if they knew each other, who Peter Bain is or was. 1873. So this is sort of the Bain family plot here. So I'm gonna have to look them up and see who they were. Obviously they were notable in their time for sure. And here's another Bain right here. M.H. Bain. Martin Van Buren was the 8th President of the United States, serving just one term from 1837 until 1841. And he was one of the primary founders of the Democratic Party. Because he was 5 feet 6 inches tall, he earned the nickname Little Van, and also the Little Magician. His other nicknames included the Red Fox, Martin Van Ruin, and Old Kinderhook, or OK. He was the first U.S. president to actually be born a citizen of the United States, and he was the first president to only speak English as a second language. His first language was Dutch. He was born here in Kinderhook, New York on December 5th, 1782, and died here on July 24th, 1862, from asthma and heart failure. He and his wife had 5 children, but sadly she died at the age of 35 from tuberculosis on February 5th, 1819, and was never able to serve as First Lady. She's laid to rest here with her husband and with their son, Martin Van Buren Jr., who died at the young age of 42, also from tuberculosis. When I searched online for the least visited presidential gravesite, Van Buren was the president most often named. My friend and historian Kurt Dion also agreed. And when it comes to presidential gravesites, few people know more than Kurt Dion. He's visited all of their gravesites and all of the gravesites of the vice presidents as well, in addition to writing the book Presidential Grave Hunter, which, if you haven't already read it, I highly recommend. I'm guessing that one of the reasons his gravesite is not visited as often as some of the other presidential gravesites might be because of its remote location. Kinderhook is a very small town located about 20 miles south of the city of Albany in upstate New York. Most of the other presidential gravesites are in or near much larger cities or just easier to get to. Calvin Coolidge's gravesite is even more remote, but he was born on the 4th of July, and every year the town has a big 4th of July celebration, which attracts lots of tourists and visitors to his gravesite. He was also a much later president, and I believe a much more popular president. The plaque here gives the president's date of birth and date of death, as well as his wife's date of birth and date of death. And I always find it interesting when there are homes right next door to or across the street from cemeteries. I definitely would not mind living next to a cemetery. I wonder if at one point this right here, this was a road, and I saw another one like it over there. So maybe it did have a road going through and around it, and they decided just to let the grass overgrow it. Yeah, see, there's a gate here. So yeah, there must have been an entranceway at one point, but maybe once the cemetery filled up, or they stopped burying people here, I'm just guessing. Ooh, the wind is so cold, it's picking up again. Kinderhook Reformed Church Cemetery. Please note, glass containers, recreational vehicles, and in-ground planting are prohibited. Flowers and decorations must be maintained and removed before October 15th. Winter pieces may be placed after November 15th. Okay, so it's the Kinderhook Reformed Church Cemetery. Ooh, and the wind is picking up. This week I want to give a shout out and a very big thank you to my newest channel supporters, Kathleen Williams, or K-Will, Tommy Monroe, Cliff Sheffield, and April Carhuff Manning. Thank you all so much for your very kind and very generous donations to this channel using Patreon and YouTube Super Thanks. They're all very appreciated. And thank you too to all of you who have taken the time to subscribe to my channel, to give them thumbs up, to leave comments, and to share them with your friends. That's all very helpful too and means a lot. So as always, thanks for joining me on this very historic presidential road trip to the past. And until our next trip to the cemetery together. Thanks for sharing the memories, everybody.